Okay, so this is chapter 18 of Zodiac, Robert Bob Hall Starr. At the time of the known Zodiac killings, 1968 to 70, Robert Bob Hall Starr, this name has been changed, was a professional student and lived with his mother in her house in Toledo. He was highly intelligent with an IQ of around 135. In 1971, he kept a trailer in Santa Rosa. In 1969, he had looked like the Zodiac composite description. He always kept to himself, collected rifles, he owned two .22s, and hunted game. To his sister-in-law and brother, he spoke of man as true game. Starr often spoke of man as the most dangerous game. In November 1969, Sheila, not her real name, his 26-year-old sister-in-law noticed a paper in Starr's hand and asked him what it was. He had been keeping it in a metal box in his brother's room in the North Bay. Hiding the lines of strange symbols, Starr said, "This is the work of an insane person. I'll show it to you later." He never did. The family became increasingly concerned. When he was asked by his sister-in-law about a bloody knife on the front seat of his car the day of the Berryessa attack, he said, "That's chicken blood. I used it to kill chickens." Sergeant Molinax already suspected Starr of another terrible crime, that of molesting a child at a school where he had once worked. This would fit in with Zodiac's knowledge of school bus routes and vacation times for the kiddies. Men of Starr's type, although they have a great underlying hatred of women, are capable of great personal charm. Starr tended to have a taunting way of speaking and often suffered from painful headaches. Hustad had a theory about the car Zodiac used in the Blue Rock Springs murder. Starr had been fired from a job at the gas station the week before Darlene's death. A friend of Starr parked his Ford sedan there overnight to be repaired, and Starr could have used the car to commit the murder, returned it, and made the call to the VPD. Starr and the owner of the '58 Ford often talked of death and murder. In August, Starr's friend also died from natural causes. It was early in 1971 that Starr's family, his mother, brother, and sister-in-law began to suspect, on the basis of his erratic behavior, that he might just be the Zodiac killer. After consultation with Starr's uncle and much agonizing, the family dialed Takashi and told them of their fears. Armed with information turned over to them by Starr's relatives, Armstrong and Takashi began laying the groundwork for a search warrant. Fred Wiseman of the DA's office in San Francisco called the Sonoma County DA's office, who in turn put Takashi and Armstrong in charge, along with two Sonoma detectives. Jesus, thought Takashi, Starr lives part of the time with his mom in Toledo, camps out with his brother and sister-in-law in San Rafael, and has his own trailer near the campus. Which do we search? The investigators decided to take on the trailer since Starr had been there on Tuesday. Starr had a job at a chemical company in Petaluma and a locker there. Takashi hoped that any evidence they wanted wasn't being hidden there. Friday, June 4th, 1971. San Francisco PD was very excited over the suspect. Even Takashi's secretary, Kate, looked up from typing the warrant request and information to say, "Good luck, I think you have him." Kate said Takashi, "We're going to give it a try." The request was taken to a Sonoma Superior Court judge. He read the affirmation and signed it. "I believe you have enough information to execute the search warrant," he said. "Gentlemen, I wish you luck." The warrant specified pieces of bloody shirt, rope, pens, glasses, trousers with pleats, blue or dark parka navy-type jacket, a knife in a sheath, and a black hood. Even the dark clip-on glasses seen by Brian Hartnell were mentioned. Starr's family had told the two San Francisco detectives where his trailer and car were. The suspect's family had never visited him there, but they did know that the trailer was off wheels. Takashi had the manager of the trailer court show them specifically which stall the student used. The lot manager said that he had driven off just before they'd arrived at the trailer lot. The detectives found the door to the trailer standing open and decided to make a cursory search while they waited for Starr to return. Bob Degazzi, the print expert who had discovered the spine killing, was with Armstrong and Takashi along with the two deputy sheriffs. The men moved into the yellow trailer. Papers and debris were everywhere. There was a sour smell that filled the room. Takashi moved Starr's bed away from the wall and found the largest jar of Vaseline he had ever seen and several large uncleaned dildos that rolled out onto the floor at his feet. They carefully replaced rubber dildos and moved the bed back. Then they went into the small, unkept kitchen. "My God," said Takashi. "Bill, get a load of this." The detective had opened the freezer and seen little animal hearts, livers, and mutilated rodent bodies. "It's not everybody who keeps dead squirrels in their freezers," thought Degotsi. I later learned that Starr was working toward a degree in biology and had received permission from the state government to collect and experiment on small animals. They waited 45 minutes for Starr to come back. When they heard Starr's auto drive up, they rushed to the door of the trailer. The car was dirty. There were clothes in the back seat and papers, books, and exams that went back years. The student got out and lumbered up to his door. "What's this all about?" he said coolly, without a trace of panic. He already knew who these detectives were from a visit they had paid him at one of his jobs last May. After a 2-hour interrogation, they'd brought him back. Later, Starr was fired from his job. He felt it was caused by the detectives' inquiries. "We want to talk to you. We have a search warrant for your vehicle, for your trailer, and for your person. We have information that you are a very good suspect in the Zodiac murders," said Armstrong. "I thought that guy was arrested," said Starr. "I live in Valito." "We know." "Well, help yourself," said the stocky man. Takashi looked over at the student as the student pointed at the trailer. Starr was wearing a Zodiac watch, a Kelbar skin diver underwater chronograph made by the Zodiac Watch Company. He was also wearing a Z ring. When Takashi gestured towards it, Starr told him that his sister had sent it to him in 1967. The detectives began a more complete search, rolling back furniture and moving the bed. Takashi pulled back the sheets and then once again pushed the bed all the way from the wall. The dildos rolled out at his feet. "Are these yours?" asked Takashi. "I just sort of fool around," said the stocky student. He did not seem embarrassed at all to the detectives, but as they continued the hour-long search, which tore apart his place pretty good, Starr began to become uneasy and anxious. The two detectives were aware of how physically powerful Starr was in the close quarters. "We have to take your prints," Takashi told the student. "We have to take your tips. These things have to be done." Starr was obviously annoyed and fought against having his prints taken. The print man, Degotsi, finally got good samples and started making comparisons quietly by the lamp in the corner of the trailer. Degotsi had been pretty excited about Starr, especially when he heard the suspect was familiar with the area, was ambidextrous, and was good with weapons. Meanwhile, Takashi and Armstrong were getting samples of Starr's handprinting. Takashi had 2 sheets of paper with typed sentences supplied by C.I.N.I.'s Morrill. He told the suspect he had to reprint the sentences on the page. "We want you to print right and left-handed and in uppercase and lowercase," said Takashi. "We want you to print this list of sentences." Takashi handed him a black felt-tipped pen. He showed him the phrase, "Up until now, I have killed 5, and said, "We want you to just print the way you normally print." "I don't do it left-handed," said Starr. "I understand you have some ability with your left hand." "Who told you that?" "We've done a very good background," said Takashi. "We know what you can do and what you can't." Starr was naturally left-handed, was forced to be right-handed in elementary school, and eventually reverted to left. His family and friends all said he could write and shoot with either hand. Morrill felt that the Zodiac letters were written right-handed. The stocky man wrote with his left hand and appeared to have some difficulty. "I can't," he said. "Do the best you can. Print capital letters, small letters. Print what we tell you," said Takashi. The student didn't like that, but Takashi had decided that they were going to do everything they could with Starr, but stand him on his head. The detectives had him go from A to Z and from 1 to 100. It was obvious to Takashi that the student was altering his printing, but it had the spacey quality that was found in the Zodiac letters. "Why can't I print what I want?" said Starr. "Because this is what we want you to print," said Takashi, impatience beginning to show in his voice. The detectives had him print "Yours truly," and then asked Starr to print "This is the Zodiac speaking." "What are you making me say, that I'm Zodiac?" "No, but we have to compare. If you're not the man, we'll leave you alone. We'll just walk away from you, rule you out completely. But we have to be sure," said Takashi. The student still balked, but he wrote out the phrase. Takashi produced a second page of quotes. They had Starr write, "In answer to your asking for more details about the good times I had in Valito, I shall be very happy to supply even more material." Starr copied it faithfully, but repeated the word "more." Then Starr was made to write, "All people who are shaking hands shake hands like that." Takashi noticed that the last lines tilted towards the bottom right side of the page, as was common in the Zodiac letters. At last, the detectives made their way out of the stifling trailer into the cool evening air. They adjourned to a coffee shop some 6 blocks away to have a snack and discuss the search. Degazzi was depressed. "If the prints on Paul Stein's cab," he said, "were those of Zodiac, then they don't match Star's. It's a positive no." Back in San Francisco, Armstrong and Takashi sent the Star printing samples off to Morrill in Sacramento and went home to wait for an answer. Within a day, Morrill got back to them on the phone. "Sorry, Dave, there's just no match." At this time, no one had any idea that Zodiac was using some sort of tracing technique in his letters. Takashi was also aware that, as I learned from later research, stress produces dramatic changes in the handwriting of a sexual sadist. I also obtained samples of Star's real handwriting and job applications. It was tiny and very difficult, and very different from the samples he made for Armstrong and Takashi. "Everything sounded just perfect," Takashi told me later. "But we couldn't find a way to prove that he was the Zodiac killer. My feelings were that a mistake was made in not searching Star's mother's Valito residence, where Star often stayed, but it was in another county. Zodiac had used the 2-county technique right from the beginning. He killed in areas that bordered on unincorporated sections of cities, or that were areas of disputed jurisdiction between police and sheriff's departments. If Star were Zodiac, then after the Santa Rosa search, he had only to go back to Valito and destroy any physical evidence that might exist in his mother's basement. I learned through the Department of Motor Vehicles that Star owned 2 trailers in 1979. What if, in 1971, Star had other unregistered trailers? He might have had a trailer in every county where the killings took place, and the detectives had the misfortune to search the wrong one. Star's father died just before the Riverside murder, 1966. He passed on to his son a love of sailing. The Zodiac killing costume consisted of old-fashioned navy clothes, pants with pleats. Was Star, out of hatred or even love of his father, dressing up in his father's clothes to do the killing? Had these clothes hung in his father's cedar closet in Valito until 1975 when the house was sold? Zodiac spoke of his death machine in his basement. Star's room in his mother's house in Valito was a basement. It was a basement that swarmed with the little animals Star liked to experiment with. Star had studied chemistry. The Zodiac bus bomb was a chemical bomb. Star spent some 3 years at an institution for the criminally insane as a result of a child molesting charge in 1975. When he was released, he was returned to living under his mother's house, this time in Santa Rosa. She spoiled him, buying him a plane and 2 boats. But the really interesting thing about Star was this timetable. 1971, March 22nd, Zodiac postcard to Chronicle. 1971, June 4th, Star's trailer searched. From June 1971 until January 1974, Zodiac letters unexplainably ceased. The murders directly connected with Santa Rosa began at this time, February 1972. 1974, January 29th, first Zodiac letter in 3 years. 1974, May 8th, letter to Chronicle from Zodiac. 1974, July 8th, letter to Chronicle from Zodiac. 1975, December, Star committed to institution for child molesting. The linked murders of young hitchhikers around Santa Rosa cease. In 1975, December 30th, Star is released. He immediately writes Takashi a typewritten note. 1978, April 24th. Zodiac writes again for the first time in 4 years. 1979, February 24th. The first linked murder occurs since October 16th, 1975, when Susan Dye was strangled in Santa Rosa. Teresa Matthews was strangled on a Saturday and left by a body of water, Rusan River. If Star were Zodiac, then the search of his Santa Rosa trailer had caused him to stop writing until the heat was off. When Star was released from prison, Zodiac wrote again. I had asked Star's parole officer if he had received a letter from him, and he told me that he had. It was typed and had double the needed postage on it. The address slanted downwards, stamps inverted. I told Takashi, not only that, Inspector, until recently the parole officer had no idea that this guy was a Zodiac suspect. In fact, the day he found out, the P.O. was home looking at copies of the Zodiac letters. All evening, he kept getting these calls where someone would just breathe. The P.O. told his girlfriend, I think that he knows that I know, and that he knows that I know that he knows. The P.O. did this impersonation of Star for me where he tried to probe the suspect to see what sets him off. It was at their monthly meeting. You say you don't like to come to these meetings, Bob. But if you don't, then you're going to have to go back to jail, said the P.O. At this, Star gripped the sides of his chair, lowered his head, looked up at the P.O. and said, I wouldn't like that at all. He kept saying this over and over again. He became very menacing. It was a total change in personality. That sounds exactly like Star, said Takashi. He cooperated with us, but only under much duress. I found out something I bet you didn't know, Dave. Star has an enlarger. Isn't that interesting? Now you have two people with enlargers, Andrews and Star. They talked Star into seeing a psychiatrist, and Bolito PD discovered that he had been boning up at the library on what the proper responses to psychiatric tests should be, I said. Star would take a test in this manner. He would study the board for a minute and then react swiftly, finishing the test immediately. These would be physical tests involving shapes and pegs. Dave, I saw a report from the psychiatrist that read, he, Star, was a study of economy in motion and laughed when others tried to duplicate the ease in which he solved problems. It was obvious that Star took all of his tests the same way. He would not smile or show emotion and would speak in a slow monotone. The test analyst gave Star an ink blot test in 1978, I told Takashi, and was warned to look for answers that contained the letter Z. The odds of more than one answer beginning with Z are very remote, the analyst told VPD. I don't expect any. Well, the first ink blot that Star was shown reminded him of a zygometric arch. The analyst was taken by this, and at the end of the test found out that Czar had given 5 Z answers. As you may remember, Stein was shot in the zygomatic arch. When Takashi was demoted to pawn shop detail, Star expressed his feelings to his P.O. He felt that Armstrong and Takashi's visit to his office in 1971 had cost him his job. Now, Mr. Takashi will know what it feels like, Star said through his teeth. Star works at a store as a salesman but hates working for a livings, his P.O. told me. He still lives in the basement, but now it's the basement of his mother's new home here in Santa Rosa, and he still has live chipmunks running around the house. But I'll tell you one thing, said the P.O. He's got his act down great. Wednesday, March 5th, 1980. I turned out the lights on my car and coasted to a stop under an elm about 25 feet from Star's front window. It was 8:30 p.m. There was a chill to the night air. To the left of Star's house was a driveway and garage. There was only one VW in sight. I wondered where he kept his campers and boats and other cars. I stayed for hours watching the window overlooking Star's porch and front door. I could make out the silhouette of a large hulking shape, which I took to be some cabinet or appliance. At 11 p.m., it moved. I had been watching the shadow of Star. Saturday, March 8th, 1980. Star worked in a store. The store was so large that I decided it would be safe to get a closer look at him. It was a bright, shining morning. I parked blocks away so that he couldn't see what kind of car I drove or get a glimpse of my license number. I brought my 2 little boys and a friend with me. Star had never seen me. I, of course, knew exactly what he looked like from photographs. I found him in the back of the store ringing up sales. I had intended to buy something from him in order to get a sample of his handprinting, but there was such a feeling of menace and of animal strength radiating from him that I left quickly. I had expected a mild, overweight man who would be, like Son of Sam, the last person you would suspect of being a mass murderer, but this man was powerful and dangerous looking. His eyes were cast into darkness beneath a heavy brow. He still wore a close blonde crew cut. He was heavy, all right, but the girth came from solid muscle, especially in his neck, shoulders, and arms. I gathered up my boys from the front of the store where they were waiting and took them for a soft drink at a nearby 7-Eleven store. My youngest got a prize on the bottom of his Slurpee drink. It was a ring with one of the signs of the Zodiac on it. Jesus Christ. Okay. Whew. Sunday, March 9th, 1980. Once again, I spoke with Starr's parole officer in Santa Rosa. He had knowledge of the man's movements since his release from prison. Is he still living with his mother? I asked. Oh yeah, his mother is still there, and it's a strange situation. I talked with him about his mother. It's one of the major things in his therapy and the way he relates to life. Do you think Starr hates his mother? I asked. Oh yeah, he absolutely hates her. She would say about the father, that miserable son of a bitch, he's gone all the time. He never takes care of his family and satisfies my needs. He never takes care of his familial responsibilities. Men are all assholes. They all do the same thing. They're all miserable sons of bitches. Then she would tell her son, you're just like all other men. You're this, you're that. Years and years of that completely demolished his ability to have regular heterosexual relations with an adult female. One of the things he does frequently is when his mother says, why are you the way you are? He says, I'm all fucked up. The reason I'm all fucked up is because of you. You made me the way I am. And she feels really guilty, and all the guilt comes out, and she refuses to do anything to stop whatever behavior he's involved in. I told him one day, Bob, you're suspected of being the Zodiac killer. I know, he said to me. What do you think about that? I asked him. I think that was real wrong to do that to me. I think it was unfair. It was? Yeah. Have you read the reports? Yeah, I know what they are talking about. That's all a pack of lies, Starr told me. That's fine. Who in hell is going to admit to being the Zodiac? Robert, the greatest phrase I ever heard in dealing with child molesters and mentally disordered sex offenders was, whatever gets you off, gets you off. And it doesn't make any difference whether you go to Ostacato's Institution for Criminally Insane for 4 years and they bring you back and they say you're sane and you're cured and you're no longer a MDSO. What basically happens is whatever gets you off, gets you off. You may be able to repress what gets you off, but that is still what gets you off. Tuesday, March 11th, 1980. In Toledo again, I learned more about Starr. In 1965, before there were any murders, before there were any letters, before there was such a creature as the Zodiac, Starr and two friends, Ken and Bill, not their real names, from Torrance went hunting. The following conversation took place as reported in a police deposition filed July 1971. I would rather hunt people than wild game, Starr told his friends. I think of man as true game. Man, after all, is the most dangerous game. This is what I would do, said Starr, warming to the subject. I would hunt them at night with an electric gun sight, a flashlight taped to the barrel of my gun. Christ, but why? Asked Ken. Because, said Starr, turning and locking his unblinkable gaze on his fellow hunter. I want to. And not only that, I would write taunting letters to the police and the papers, and I would call myself the Zodiac. My sources told me several more stories about Starr and his life in Toledo. In 1973, a doctor's report on him said that he was potentially violent, he is dangerous, and he is capable of killing. The doctor suspected that Starr had 5 separate personalities. When Starr's parole officer visited Starr's Santa Rosa home, he had neighborhood children riding bicycles and waving red flags to direct them up the driveway. Another example of Starr's dark sense of humor, said the senior parole officer. Starr's physical strength could be verified by a boyhood friend who was now a retired highway patrolman. When Starr was a teenager, the friend passed him walking down a San Francisco street and in the rearview mirror of his car saw 5 Marines closing in on him. There's going to be real trouble now, the friend thought. But before he could back up, bodies were flying everywhere. Starr was the only one left standing. I backed up my car and asked if he was all right and if he needed a lift home, the friend told me. He said that he was going for a walk and no thanks. At a store where he once worked, he was hassled by the men there. He dared one to come at him. He picked the man up and hurled him across the room into a stack of cardboard boxes. Was he strong enough to lift the dead co-eds in Santa Rosa and hurl them all over railings far into the bushes? In the Navy, Starr had co-training as a wire operator and a sailmaker. In spite of weight and blood pressure problems, Starr still did scuba diving. When Starr was arrested as a child molester and when he was released on bail, he told all of his friends that he was being arrested because he was the Zodiac. During the trial, he took to harassing the deputy who was testifying against him by standing outside the man's house at night. Finally, one evening, the cop came out and chased him off. When Starr was convicted, the police came to his home and were let in by his mother. They found him in the center of his basement room, howling and shrieking, live chipmunks crawling all over him, and squirrel shit dripping from his shoulders. During this time in prison, Starr wrote his friends that he hoped Zodiac would kill and write a new letter to the papers. That will clear me. After his release in 1978, Starr was talked into a series of psychiatric tests by a Santa Rosa psychologist, Dr. Thomas Rykoff. This name has been changed by request. My source told me the Santa Rosa shrink came to the conclusion that Starr is extremely dangerous and is a sociopath, feels no guilt, and that he is highly intelligent and incapable of functioning with women in a normal way. The sociopath label was certain by the next to the last session. When Starr talked of Zodiac, he cried. Dr. Rykoff felt that Starr was repressing very deep hatred. The psychologist was midway in his study of Starr when, as part of a training program for a social rehabilitation group he was organizing in Santa Rosa, he hypnotized a young woman. As the woman told Rykoff more and more of her feelings and suspicions about her brother-in-law and his dark side, the doctor began to realize that the character being sketched was frighteningly familiar. "What's this?" thought Rykoff. "That sounds just like Starr. The potential for danger is just the same." Rykoff said nothing to the woman who he had correctly deduced was Starr's sister-in-law. The doctor wondered if he was being set up. First, he had seen Starr as a favor to Lieutenant Hustad and Starr's P.O., and now the patient's sister-in-law showed up with more suspicions about Starr. The coincidence was just too much. Rykoff had to know just who this man was and why were so many people interested in him. The psychologist was becoming more and more terrified of his patient. On November 1st, 1978, the doctor asked his brother, a San Francisco policeman, to look into Starr's background and find out what he was really suspected of. Late the next day, his brother got back in touch with the psychologist. I found out he was a major suspect in the Zodiac case," said Rykoff. "Oh shit," said the doctor. "Find out anything you can about him and how I should deal with him." The forthcoming answer was anything but reassuring. "We felt strongly then and now that Starr was our best suspect," Takashi told the doctor's brother. "We cut him loose because we weren't able to find any physical evidence. Believe me, we did everything we could with the guy. Personally, my gut feeling is that he is the man. Tell Dr. Rykoff that when he talks to him to do it in a place that he can get out of in a hurry. Keep at an oblique angle to him. Don't get too close, and above all, don't make him angry." Rykoff had Starr's sister-in-law Sheila back in and with Husted put her under deep hypnosis on November 15th. When she remembers a paper with strange lines of symbols she had seen in Starr's hand in 1969, Husted decided to see if she could redraw these figures. In automatic writing, she slowly drew 4 lines of symbols. Automatic writing is usually sprawling, but hers was straight and even, grid-like, just like the Zodiac's. The symbols closely resembled the 3rd line of the Zodiac's 340-character cipher. As the hypnotic session progressed and the woman spoke more and more about Starr, she began to tremble and shake. Her knuckles turned white. Finally, Rykoff had to stop the hypnotic session. Rykoff and the sister-in-law weren't the only ones afraid of Starr. His own mother possibly feared him. Though she lived in the same house, she kept traveling constantly around the U.S. and Europe. Was it to get away from him? Both the P.O. and sister-in-law thought so. Pension money from Starr's deceased father was probably the capital used to finance the trip. Starr's parole officer was observant enough to notice that Starr wore pleated, old-fashioned pants. At the time the P.O. first discovered that Starr was a major Zodiac suspect, he looked out of the window of the apartment he was sharing in Bodega and saw the student standing 2 stories below by the complex's swimming pool. He was smiling straight up at the P.O., looking like some white-beached whale and holding the hand of a little 9-year-old girl. There was no reason for Starr to be there. He looked totally out of place among all the young people. He had obviously taken the hand of the young girl so that he would fit in with the crowds of families. Once officers on the way to the Santa Rosa area that a killer had used as a dumping ground for the bodies of Santa Rosa co-eds stopped in their tracks on Sully Road. Walking down the road toward them and from the murder area was Starr. He traveled the road to go skin diving, he told the open-mouthed policeman. Wednesday, March 12th, 1980. This evening again, I watched Star at work in the store. At one point, I stood closer than 2 feet away, listening to his soft, quiet voice as he spoke with customers. His brow was even more massive than I remembered, his body sturdy and strong, but the paunch around the middle was there, as Zodiac had been described. Star wore a bright red overcoat with the name Bob on a patch sewn over his left breast pocket. He had previously worked in the rear of the store doing stock work, but now he worked practically all the time near the front window. On the wall was a sign. The lettering, done with a felt-tip pen, looked similar to the Zodiac printing. I would have to get a copy of the sign. Later, I shot a few photos of Star from across the street when he had his head turned partially away from the window. I was afraid he would see me. At 5:15, I left and made some time exposure shots of Star's house. Then I drove back to the store. I planned to get a photo of Star in silhouette as he left work and passed under the bright vapor lights of a drugstore. At 6:30 p.m., I saw him leave the store and start across the street toward me. I positioned myself in the shadows and waited for him to pass between me and the lights, but he didn't. I realized that he wasn't walking home tonight. He must have brought his car to work. I raced for my VW. In a few seconds, I was behind the wheel. I didn't see Star anywhere. I started the engine, turned off my lights, and was about to pull out onto the darkened street when the VW coupe parked behind me came to life and slid onto the road, lights off. The car had been hidden under the shadows of a large tree. I hadn't realized it was occupied. The driver peered into my car as he drove slowly alongside. It was Star. He turned the corner and started east. I waited a moment, turned out my headlights, and then followed him. He was heading away from his house. 3 blocks away he stopped, and I parked about a block away from him and began walking toward him. When I was close enough to make him out in the dark, I could see that he was looking around to see if anyone was watching. Suddenly, he walked over and opened the door of another car parked on the street. He got in and raced off into the blackness. By the time I sprinted back to my car, he was gone. My aim had been to see if I could find out where he was keeping his trailers, or at least to know where he hung out. Why had he switched cars? Was he actually afraid people were following him? Next time I followed Star, I would have to use a different car. Even if Star was not the Zodiac, he was up to something very strange. Friday, March 14th, 1980. Lieutenant Houston was buying a pony for his daughter. I watched him from the wire gate 100 feet away. It was a stormy day, and the sky was filled with black clouds. The grass in the field waved in the wind. Hustad's truck leaked a steady drip of rusty water on the edge of the road. On the other side of the barbed fence, a watchdog barked at me. Hustad believed that Zodiac was responsible for the string of Santa Rosa co-ed killings. That afternoon, he had shown me a 2-page list of victims. "There's a lot I haven't told you and can't," he said as he unlocked the truck. "I was thinking that if you could be brought into the case officially, then I could tell you much more. We need some new stuff, something we can get a warrant with. I want you to hypnotize some of the witnesses again, and if you were there as a police artist, we could put together some good composite drawings and also learn some things that might help your book." "That would be fine with me," I said. "Star has a friend I haven't told you about before," said Hustad, "and Star seems to have confided in him that he is the Zodiac killer and told him details of some of the murders. Of course, such a confession would not mean Star had committed the crimes. False confessions are common in notorious murder cases. I'd like to put the friend under and the sister-in-law as well, and of course Kathleen Johns, if we could ever find her. Have you had any luck on that? She was living in Riverside until December. I have the address, but she moved and my letter came back unable to forward. I had mentioned searching for Star's trailers earlier in Hustad. I think we know where one is now, but I don't think there's anything there," said Hustad. "I think any evidence is in his basement. Not out in the open where we could see it. The guy's a carpenter, good with his hands. I would go in with sonar equipment and look for a hidden room. I think, Robert, that's where you'll find the bloody clothes, keys, and maybe even photos. I think Star has built himself a place to relive his crimes." Sunday, April 20th, 1980. Driving on 101 almost to Santa Rosa, I tried to imagine how the killer of the co-eds had managed to pick them up on the freeway. Most of the Santa Rosa Junior College students got rides on Mendocino Avenue in front of the school or at a gas station at the College Avenue on-ramp. For the killer to pick up a hitchhiking student, I felt that he had to be in Santa Rosa initially. The victims were found dumped on Franz Valley Road, a distance of 7 to 8 miles from Santa Rosa. I wondered how, in that scant distance, the killer was able to strangle them and, in some cases, elaborately tie them up and then dump them on a road so narrow and so winding that a parked car could be happened upon any second. In 3 cases, the girls were poisoned with stericine. Fast acting as the alkaloid is, how did the murderer get the women to ingest it before he got to Franz Valley Road? The killer must have had a home to take the women to for at least a short period. I was certain that the murderer must be some sort of resident of Santa Rosa or at least have lodging there. Star, I remembered, had a trailer in Santa Rosa. In the driving rain, I made my way on Mark West Springs Road until I came to a fork. To my left was Franz Valley Road. To my right was Porter Creek Road. Bodies had been found on both roads. I was reminded of Zodiac's killing on Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs. In both cases, the killer came to a fork in the road. One time he went right, and next he went to the left in search of victims. On Franz Valley Road, I drove until I came to the area where 7 bodies had been found and parked my small car on the shoulder of the road. I made my way down the embankment through heavy trees and underbrush to the floor of the ravine some 60 feet below. The killer must have been incredibly strong to hurl bodies over a fence and past the heavy shrubs and foliage to the bottom of the ravine. Drenched, I drove my car to the end of Franz Valley Road, where I realized that even if the killer had taken the Porter Creek fork, he would have met up with Franz Valley Road again at Calistoga. And for the first time I became aware of how very close to Pacific Union College at Angwin I was. Shepard and Hartnell had been students there. Friday, April 25th, 1980. As I drove to Santa Rosa, I thought of Dean Farron. He had begun to receive crank calls about his wife's death at the hands of Zodiac. Star was not at the store when I stopped to look for him, so I got back in my car and drove past his home. All of his cars were there. One was a gray Skylark, one was a blue-white Corvair, and the other car was a 1967 VW Karma Ghia, an almost exact duplicate of Brian Hartnell's car from the Lake Berryessa attack. He also had 2 sailboats and somewhere else 3 special construction trailer campers. I figured he had taken a long, late lunch. At 3 o'clock, I went back to the store. There was still no sign of him. I decided to take another look at the poster in back with its printing that resembled Zodiac's. As I had feared, it was gone. But as I turned away, I saw something that brought me up short. Hanging slightly above my eye level were 6 clipboards with notes and writing on them. One of them was block handprinting on it in felt-tip pen that was the closest to the Zodiac printing that I had ever seen. The block of printing was signed. It was signed by Star. VPD had told me that they had no samples of Star's printing, though I had seen script letters that the police had in their files that Star had mailed from the mental institution and that he now typed everything. The store was crowded and dark, and I knew that taking a photograph without arousing the attention of the staff would be next to impossible. 2. Star could return any moment for his clipboard. I didn't want to tangle with him. I came back a short time later with a friend, and we bought a few items, then moved to the back of the store. I pretended to take a picture of my friend clowning around with a wooden spoon. What I was really photographing, with the lens wide open, was the lettering almost 4 feet away. We did this in an open, loud, obnoxious way, and it came off perfectly. Now I had to get the photo of the clipboard developed and enlarged. I couldn't believe that anything could possibly come out under the circumstances, but I decided to get the best photographer I knew to try and bring the printing up enough for Morrill to examine. My absurd backup plan, if the photo was a dud, was to make a copy of the note in felt tip and tape it down to a brown clipboard exactly like the one in Star's store. I would then go back to the store and make a switch with my copy. I knew I was a good enough artist that if I put the two side by side and moved them around, Star himself couldn't tell which was his and which was the one I brought into the store. Monday, April 28th, 1980. Gary Fong developed the film for me. It's going to be a bit grainy, he said. That's fine, I said. I'll be happy just to get anything to send to Sacramento. It wasn't until mid-afternoon that Gary had enlarged it enough to please himself. I got a sharp, clear, black and white 8x10 from him. At 4:30, I mailed it to Morel in Sacramento by special delivery. The people at the post office assured me that he would get it early the next morning. Tuesday, April 29th, 1980. At 10:17 a.m., Morel called and told me that he had gotten my exemplar and said, with the other handwriting expert there, Dave DeGuillermo from Pleasant Hill, had looked at the sample. On the basis of the exemplar you sent me, Robert, I cannot rule this man out as the Zodiac killer, Morel said. They look good. I've got DeGuillermo here with me. Could you get us more samples of his writing? I promised I would. I decided to use the direct approach. Thursday, May 1st, 1980. I called Starr's employer at home at 8:30 p.m. I explained that I needed help in regard to an urgent, serious, and confidential matter and needed specimens of printing from someone who worked at his store. I emphasized that I wasn't interested in the content of the hand printing, but only in the shape and spacing of the individual characters. I held back Starr's name because I didn't want to jeopardize the job of an innocent man, and at no time did I mention that it involved a murder case. Wait a minute, are you insinuating that there is the possibility that there is someone in my employ who might be a criminal? The boss said. Sir, I don't employ criminals. No, it has to do with threatening letters received over a 10-year period, I said. I've got to think about it, the boss said. I don't think I'd like anyone doing that to me. Over the next few weeks, he changed his mind several times, but in the end, I was denied access to the freight files and Starr's requisition slips. Because of the search warrant served on Starr in 1971, the Valida PD was hesitant to request another, especially now that Starr had moved to another county. Husted, saddled with other cases, would, I imagined, have preferred that a civilian gather hand-printing samples. As a favor to me, Morel was checking them out. Thursday, August 7th, 1980. And so, for some time, in an effort to get samples of Starr's handprinting, I asked my friends to buy things from him. Did you know that I used to be a teacher? Starr told one female friend of mine. I taught one class of 8th graders, but I really enjoyed teaching elementary school kids. My kids did well. One little girl in the 3rd grade knew 10th grade math by the time she graduated. My entire class could read at 7th grade level. I loved working with elementary school kids. That's a great age, my friend agreed. I thought that would be the up-and-coming field. And now I can't get a teaching job, so I end up working here 6 days a week for $5.32 an hour. The only day I get off is Friday. Do you always work 6 days a week? That must be hard. Yes, except for one time when I took a few days off without pay, but it was like pulling teeth to get them, said Starr. Well, you know how hard teaching jobs are to get in California. True, but I'm going down tomorrow night to apply for a job teaching adult education, 20 hours a week at $10 an hour. It sure beats what I make here. But this job is all right. I like dealing with people, he said, looking straight through her.